AM Joy.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. I'm Jonathan Capehart, warming up the seat for Joy, who will be joining us shortly. This week, the political turned philosophical when moral relativism became a subject of debate after many on both sides of the political aisle pounced on a new accusation that Democratic Senator Al Franken had kissed and groped a woman without her consent, and demanded the kind of condemnation that has dogged the Republican nominee for Alabama Senator Roy Moore since he was accused of multiple instances of sexual misconduct against teenage girls. Now, both men are facing calls to bar them from occupying a seat in the U.S. Senate. But that is where their similarities end, because one has admitted to what, as far as we know, appears to be an isolated incident. He's apologized both publicly and in a personal letter to the woman he assaulted. Franken has welcomed accountability, even calling for a Senate Ethics Committee investigation into the allegations against him. He also, for what it's worth, has the support of former aides and co-workers dating back to his days on Saturday Night Live, who note his consistent record as a defender of women's rights. The other man who stands accused faces on-the-record claims from 9 women, most of whom were teenage girls at the time. They say he targeted them with unwanted sexual advances. One of them was 14 years old. Another was 16 when she says Roy Moore sexually assaulted her. Local residents of Gadsden, Alabama, around the time of the alleged incidents, told The New Yorker that Moore had been banned from a mall because of a pattern of harassment of teenage girls. There's been no statement of responsibility from Moore, who has denied the allegations as politically motivated, and through his attorney has sought to discredit at least one of his accusers. So if we can recognize the difference in the offenses committed by these two men and how they've responded, should we also recognize a difference in how to hold them accountable? Joining me now are MSNBC political contributor Jason Johnson, Jennifer Rubin, opinion writer for The Washington Post, and Anushay Hossain, contributing writer for Forbes magazine. Thank you all for being here this morning. So, answer that question that I set up this segment on. Jay, let's go down the road. Should they both be held accountable?
Of course they should. They both committed heinous acts. Okay, look, the fact that Tweeden has said, I accept his apology and I don't necessarily think he should leave office. Look, there may be other people we haven't heard that Al Franken has done this too. He should be held accountable. But we're talking about different situations here. Al Franken is in office. If someone wants to bring legal charges against him, Tweeden can do that. But the voters have to decide if that's the kind of behavior that they want in office down the road. Roy Moore is not in office yet. People have an opportunity to say, if you've done this for 30 years, if you trolled high school in custody battles for dates, we don't want you. So it's a different situation as to who can be held accountable.
Jennifer?
I think it's the difference between zero tolerance, meaning you don't let these things go by, and then a gradation in terms of what's the offense. And listen, Al Franken's going to have to go before the Ethics Committee. They're going to make a determination. Frankly, if this is the sole person, no other woman has ever been physically accosted by him, then perhaps something less than expulsion is the appropriate method. It's another question whether he should, when he stands for re-election, the people of Minnesota would put him back.
Right. Anushay?
I completely agree with Jennifer. We have to have a zero-tolerance policy, but also it can't be, oh, who is less rapey, what situation is better?
Right.
I do agree that we should have zero tolerance, and we have to have a standard because we can't be selective with our outrage.
Now, the one thing here, we've got the 9 accusers of Roy Moore on the record saying he's done this. Meanwhile, Leanne Tweeden, the woman to whom Senator Franken apologized, well, she had this to say on The View.
I wasn't calling for his resignation. I wasn't calling for his career to end. I didn't want any of that. I just wanted to shine the light and stand on the shoulders of these other women to go, this is not right. He has fessed up to it, and he apologized. And I sincerely think that he really, I think he took in and realized, man, that he looks at it now and says, I'm disgusted by my actions.
What's interesting here is, so she says he's apologized, I accept that, but the one thing she just said is he fessed up to it. And that seems to be one of the things that Republicans, and particularly the White House, is latching onto to say, aha, he's fessed up to it, he admitted it, and yet Roy Moore hasn't, the president hasn't. That makes no sense to me at all.
It's the opposite. And it doesn't make it okay as well. It's like, oh, just because he hasn't admitted it, that makes it okay. This is the sheer hypocrisy. Here we can talk about how the parties are approaching approaching this issue differently because, yes, what Franken did was wrong, but he acknowledged it. He apologized, and his victim has accepted it. Why are we still debating if child molestation is bad or acceptable on the Republican side?
And I don't understand. Roy Moore has constantly had this thing of, like, he's going to not only attack his accusers, but you got to bring out Sherlock Holmes, and I want to see the handwriting. It wasn't the yearbook. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's like, look, either you did it or you didn't. Let's move on with this and have the voters hold him accountable. Look, I'm just going to say this up front. No one else has come forward about Al Franken. I think that kind of behavior, it's unlikely to me that that's the only person he was kidding around with. We don't know. No one else has said anything. But Roy Moore, we've got 9, right? And that's something that should be taken seriously.
And, you know, this is typical Trumpian. You know, this is morality turned on its head. That if you confess, if you tell the truth, that you're worse than the president of the United States. Continue to lie and defame the women who's accused him. And I must say, you know, in this comparison, I don't for the life of me understand, Jonathan, why the Democrats keep harping on Bill Clinton, who has been out of office for 20 years. There is someone in the Oval Office right now who needs to account, who is very comparable in many ways to Roy Moore. And I think that's the comparison that we need to be making.
Let's turn to Republicans who are in this bind, who, you know, Roy Moore is a problem. Well, seemingly, should be a problem for them. The Alabama governor, Kay Ivey. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
I will cast my ballot on December the 12th, and I do believe that the nominee of the party is the one I'll vote for.
And do you believe any of the women that have brought accusations against Roy Moore?
I certainly have no reason to disbelieve any of them. There's never an excuse for or rationale for sexual misconduct or sexual abuse. It bothers me.
If it bothers you, does that at all go into your decision-making when you decide to vote for him?
You consider all this information that you have, certainly it has an impact. But at the same time, the United States Senate needs to have, in my opinion, a majority of Republican votes to carry the day.
So by that logic, let's reward this person. This is the thing that drives me crazy about all of this. Folks who have been lecturing the nation about morality and values are rallying around this person who should be just on paper a total affront to what they believe in.
I love the hypocrisy when it comes to something that you really want, right? The sexual assault may be bad unless I want someone in power. Theft is wrong, but I really want this flat screen off the back of that truck, right? Like this is what we're talking about here. And the Republican Party as a whole erodes their brand when they engage in this kind of behavior. If this guy gets into office, they're all going to suffer.
Right. And you know what? They almost have no authority on it. They have no moral authority on it. Why would you believe Trump's accusers, but you wouldn't believe Moore's? Why is Franken guilty, but Trump isn't? And if the Republicans really want to hold on to this morality banner, they have to address the big, fat, orange elephant in the room.
Ooh,
the
okay.
president.
And Jennifer, real fast.
Listen, Donald Trump is the albatross around their neck. They may get lucky and get rid of Roy Moore. The people of Alabama may decide not to put him in office. But Trump lives on. And the question for every Republican is, why did you support him? Why do you continue to support him? And why would you ever recommend him for office again?
Well, you know, we need to bring someone in here who knows all and is an expert in all this, and that is the person whose show this is. Joy Reid, let's bring you into your own show and get your views on this dilemma that Republicans seem to be in, which is, you know, forget about what we've said for 5 decades about morals and values. This is our guy. I'm going to stick with him.
Yeah, the situational ethics here, and that used to be something that Republicans were opposed to, right? The idea of the death of outrage that Bill Bennett talked about around Bill Clinton. But, you know, I think I just concur with what Jason said. It's that I want this office. We want this power. And so we have to excuse something that goes, I'm sorry, far beyond and beneath what you're talking about with Bill Clinton and the consensual affair with Monica Lewinsky, which was horrible in the sense that it was a dynamic of power that was completely asymmetrical, right? But it is not child molestation. Okay, you're talking about the situation with Al Franken, for which he has repented and apologized, which the president of the United States has not done, with more than 15 accusers accusing him of that behavior or worse. So you have for Republicans literally an ethic that now says, as long as we get power, we literally don't care who conveys that power. power to us. That person can be Donald Trump and brag about assaulting women, but we get power. That person can essentially have been accused by 9 women of assaulting when they were children, but we get power. That person can be banned from the mall because they were too creepy to walk around the mall, but we get power. And so literally whatever it is we said were our morals and values are irrelevant because we get power.
So, wait, one second. So yesterday, in what is always you always have an epic interview.
Yeah.
And yesterday you had an epic interview with Mark Burns on yesterday's edition of AM Joy. Just take a listen to this one thing.
We need to be wise with due process. I mean,
what due process could there be? This
we
isn't
would
going
want
to
all
court.
of our candidates to be morality, but morality is not the only qualification for leadership.
Oh, it's not.
The fact of the matter is, we're discovering that throughout the history of the Bible, or throughout the scriptures, we discovered God had used so many immoral people.
He then threw Dr. King under the bus.
Yeah, I noticed that
kept going.
Yeah, he kept going.
He threw Dr. King under the bus. He threw David from the Bible under the bus. And he essentially said, well, all these people have various sins. None of them were child molesters. But all these people have various sins. And so therefore, sin is sin is sin and doesn't make a difference. But the problem with that sort of connotation coming from a pastor, I think that's what made it worse.
Right.
You had A.R. Bernard sitting there next to me, sitting as you are now, who reminded our friend, Mr. Burns, Reverend Burns, that David wrote the Psalms in repentance of his sins, not in celebration of them. Donald Trump celebrates his sins and says he never prays and never asks for forgiveness. And people like Mark Burns are foursquare behind him. The idea that they can say that the person who repented, Al Franken, should be fired, but the person who boasts of his sins, Donald Trump, should be hired, and the person who simply denies his sins and calls his accusers all liars, Roy Moore, accused child molester, should also be added to the United States Senate. It's complete hypocrisy.
So let's go to the control room, element number 6. And I want to talk about the overall problem that this poses for the Republican Party. And Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona got caught on a hot mic speaking truth.
Become the party of Roy Moore and Donald Trump. We are toast.
Jennifer.
They are the party of toast because they are the party of Donald Trump. And to Joy's point, this was the natural conclusion of a party that would stand beside and behind a heinous individual like Donald Trump. Once you've done that, you will accept anything. Child molesters, murderers, there's no end to it. So they have absolutely made a pact with the devil. They're now stuck with him. And they are going to have to go into 2018 and presumably 2020, if we don't get rid of Trump before that, and have to explain to the voters why they are enabling someone who has almost 20 accusers of physical abuse.
I just don't. I think the Republicans need to think long and hard about this idea. This man, he's not allowed in Brookstone, but he's going to be allowed in the Senate, right? Like, I mean, this guy, that is what we're talking about here. Do you want that to be your party?
Genius.
Yeah.
But also, we shouldn't get, I'm worried that we're going to get distracted because the most important thing to remember in all of this is that sexual harassment and sexual assault are not partisan issues.
Right.
Breaking news, Republicans and Dems were equally capable of being misogynistic and abusing women. But we're talking about now. We can't, Bill Clinton is not in the office right now. John F. Kennedy is not in the office right now. We have to talk about the present, and that's Trump and more.
And let's remember that Bill Clinton was held to account.
Yes.
$70 million was spent holding Bill Clinton to account for that affair with Monica Lewinsky, and there was a forensic examination of his life that went along with that whitewater to Lewinsky investigation.
And he was impeached.
And he was impeached. If you want parity, then should not Donald Trump be subjected to a forensic? If Republicans want to be consistent and they want to use Bill Clinton as the standard, then if Bill Clinton
is going to investigate one, we investigate the other.
Let's investigate Trump.
But we have to talk about another victim in all of this, and this comes from AL.com. Some pastors stand behind Roy Moore, and they're citing a war on men. This is a quote from Pastor Franklin Radish of the Capitol Hill Independent Baptist Ministries. He told AL.com that the spate of accusations against men in politics, Hollywood, and elsewhere was a war on men. Quote, more women are sexual predators than men, said Radish. Quote, women are chasing young boys up and down the road, but we don't hear about that because it's not PC. What in, please someone explain this to me.
But, I think part of it is that we forgot a lot of times, I think, when we looked at the Donald Trump movement, and so much of it was around race and around demographic panic, that we forgot that a big component of the Trumpian movement was this man movement, was this notion that women were out of place, out of the box, and persecuting men. The Gamergate piece of it, the 4chan piece of it, it was incredibly misogynistic. And part of that ethos is the idea that women are sinful in nature, that women cause men to sin. There are a lot of religions, unfortunately, that place the burden of sin on women and say that it is their sinfulness that actually triggers the sinfulness of men. And so that idea that women are the problem, that women are the Eve in the garden that's making Adam eat the apple, is just a core part of a religious diktat. It shouldn't dictate our politics. If that's
beyond that, this
insane belief. Go on.
I'm so sorry. Beyond that, it's rape culture 101.
It is.
This is rape culture, blaming women for the sexual violence of men and normalizing men's sexual violence. I mean, from Eve to Monica, I mean, give us a break.
And there is an element of this that's Alabama, and it's like making the argument that whites during the civil rights movement were abused because they have people in the street holding up traffic, and therefore the poor whites need our help and our sympathy.
Real fast. I was already prepared for the war on Christmas. I didn't know there was a war on men. I guess we all need to be ready for
war on
and happy holidays.
And on that note, I got to give Joy her house back. Thank you to Jason Johnson. Jennifer and Anushay will be back later on in the show, and so will I.